Welcome to this edition of World Business Commentary. My name is Belinda Boggs and my co-host is Kristen Ciccarello. Today's very tantalizing topic is the Federal Reserve. Specifically, can we end the Fed by replacing it with artificial intelligence? Many have called to end the Fed. Some have called for a return to the gold standard, which we'll cover a bit in today's episode. Others have suggested a computer program to replace the Federal Reserve Board. Let's talk about it. Kristen, can you get us started by giving us a quick synopsis of the Fed?
I'd be happy to. The Federal Reserve, or the Fed, is the central banking system of the United States. The purpose of the Federal Reserve is to regulate banks, manage the country's money supply, and implement monetary policy. The Fed supplies money and it controls this with the rate of interest it charges banks, among other tools. We have talked about the idea that through monetary policy, the Fed has caused or exacerbated several recessions, bank crises, and asset bubbles. There have been grassroots movements to end the Fed, but these haven't really gotten far at all. At the end of the last episode, when we discussed the Fed, I hinted at the idea of replacing the Federal Reserve Board with artificial intelligence. This was based on an idea that Milton Friedman talked about.
Absolutely. We definitely want to talk about that. But first, let's talk briefly about the movement to end the Fed and return to the gold standard. Can you summarize this movement?
Sure. Here's a brief Wikipedia quote that explains it well. Quote, "Former Congressman Ron Paul of Texas and his son Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky have long attacked the Fed, arguing that it is hurting the economy by devaluing the dollar. They argue that its monetary policies cause booms and busts when the Fed creates too much or too little fiat money. Ron Paul's book, End the Fed, repeatedly points out that the Fed engages in money creation out of thin air. He argued that interest rates should be set by market forces, not by the Federal Reserve. Paul argues that the booms, bubbles, and busts of the business cycle are caused by the Federal Reserve's actions." Unquote. Now, the question is, what did they envision for replacing the Fed? The idea would be to set a firm value for the US dollar, much like when it was pegged to a specific amount of gold. They say prices would be stable and inflation controlled because the government couldn't print more money than it had gold to back it up.
Is this a feasible idea for replacing the Federal Reserve?
Well, I'm not so sure. Edwin Truman, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, who has written about gold and monetary policy, said this in 2012. Quote, "The United States does not have the capacity to run such a system in the world today." Mark Toma, an economics professor at the University of Oregon who also has written on the gold standard, said there's not enough gold in the world to cover the value of global transactions and thus alleviate the need for paper money, meaning governments would still want to float their currency's value against gold.
Okay, so the gold standard is not feasible? Then, what about this idea of artificial intelligence?
Let's revisit this quote from Milton Friedman, the 20th century's most famous economist. In 1994, when asked, quote, "What do you think of the Federal Reserve Board today?" Mr. Friedman answered, quote, "I've long been in favor of abolishing it." Unquote. Friedman repeatedly talked about the idea that a computer program should replace it. "I've always thought this was a good idea, but I haven't ever looked into it. Now that we're in the year 2023, I thought a good way to investigate this might be to begin by asking Google's AI system, Bard." By the way, for you out there watching on YouTube, if you like what you've heard so far, please subscribe to our channel and give us a big thumbs up.
Great. Now back to artificial intelligence and the Fed. Don't keep us on the edge of our seats. What did Bard have to say about this idea?
Well, Bard's answer was a little wishy-washy, but there are 3 good points. Let's look at it for fun, at least. There is no definitive answer to this question, as it depends on a number of factors, including the specific AI model used, the data available to the model, and the specific goals of the monetary policy. However, there are a number of reasons to believe that AI could potentially do a better job of managing the federal funds rate than the Federal Reserve. First, AI models are able to process and analyze much more data than humans can. This is important because monetary policy decisions are based on a wide range of economic data, including inflation, unemployment, GDP growth, and interest rates. AI models can use this data to identify trends and patterns that humans may not be able to see. Second, AI models can learn from their mistakes. This is important because monetary policy is a complex process, and even the best policymakers make mistakes from time to time. AI models can learn from their mistakes and improve their performance over time. Third, AI models are not subject to the same biases as humans. This is important because human policymakers may be influenced by their own personal beliefs or experiences when making decisions. AI models are not subject to these biases, which can lead to more objective decision-making.
Wow. Bard is smarter than I thought. What do you think of the 3 points?
Well, I was impressed. The first point, the idea that AI models are able to process and analyze much more data than humans can, is true. However, I don't think that's a key issue. Fed policymakers can simply use computers to crunch and analyze data for them, so I don't think that's the problem with the Fed today. The second and third points, on the other hand, are key for me. AI can learn from mistakes. Humans can do this too, however, the Fed always seems to be one step behind. I think AI can definitely outdo the Fed when it comes to this point.
True. What about the third point, that AI is non-biased?
This is probably the most important of the 3 points Bard makes. No matter how unbiased the Fed board members may believe that they are human, and they are influenced by experiences and emotion. This is where AI should shine. If programmed with the right models, I see no reason the Fed couldn't be replaced with AI.
So, what do you think are the chances that this will happen?
Slim to none. To make this kind of change would literally take an act of Congress. And do you think that the US Congress would make this radical of a change? I don't. So, it's probably just a fun discussion for now, nothing more.
Great stuff today. So, there you have it. We discussed the idea of ending the Fed by going back to a gold standard and having market forces control the interest rate. Based on our research, going back to a gold standard is probably not realistic. We then talked about AI replacing the Fed. Milton Friedman originally developed this idea many years before it was even possible, and now we believe there is quite a bit of merit to the idea. However, neither of us think that legislation to do this would ever pass, unless we replace our representatives with AI robots. That might be awesome. That's our segment for today. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it.